Hey guys, Captain Henson here. So in today's video, I'll be reviewing Darth Bane Path of Destruction, the first in the Darth Bane trilogy. A book and trilogy that comes highly recommended by any fan of the EU. And, of course, after reading Jedi vs. Sith, I thought it appropriate to finally read this. And also reading the Bane of the Sith short story found in Star Wars Gamer issue number 3. I read it online. So, well, guess first thing to say is, yes, this book is as good as everybody says it is. It's well written. And I think this book serves as the best story of showing us why somebody would join the Sith of their own accord. Because or Bane, before becoming Bane, lived as a miner on a corporation-owned planet, forced to pay off a debt that he's had since birth and that his father had. His father was also an abusive asshole, and nobody else liked him. So he never lived that, so he had a pretty shitty life before joining the Brotherhood of Darkness later on. He has a conversation with a few Republic soldiers while playing sabacc. And they question why anyone would favor the Sith over the Jedi and the Republic. And we know why, because, well, the Republic never gave two shits of a damn about him, so why should he care about the Republic? It reminds me of that's one of the ideas I wish they used with Rey. The idea of course, using the idea of her going to the dark side. Like, this is a character who's had a really shitty childhood. Unlike, say, Anakin or Luke. Well, yeah, they didn't have the best childhoods, and Anakin had was a fucking slave. Pretty much like Bane here. But both Skywalkers had at least one person in their life who cared about them during their childhood years. There was a light in their lives. For Anakin, it was his mother and sort of his friends. Luke, he had his friends, and despite his aunt and uncle, more so his uncle, not being the best, they still cared about him and tried. Bane and Rey had no one. I mean, Bane had a few people that he could talk to, but overall, he had no one. He was alone. And if Rey had gone this route, of her going to the dark side, because she has no reason to, at least thinking strictly with Force Awakens here, none of that Force dyad stuff, she could have been a far more interesting character if she, wasn't as, well, good or good-natured as she was. She should have been more like this, bitter, resentful, not giving two shits about, well, the Republic, the Resistance, etc., etc. I think it would have gone a long way. That's besides the point, tangent aside. Like I said, we see why somebody would want to join the Sith, why someone would feel so adamantly why somebody would so adamantly hate the Republic and even the Jedi. During his training on Sith Academy on Korriban. Yes, Korriban. We also see, and just like with the Jedi vs. Sith comic, we see why Bane goes on to create the Rule of Two, coming to the same exact conclusion as he did in Jedi vs. Sith. In here, we find out that one of his major influences, well, two other influences being Exar Kun and Naga Sadow, but the biggest influence, and just to give you a hint, Drew Karpyshyn was a writer in one of the, well, most well-beloved pieces of Star Wars media ever. Can you guess what that is? Oh, I'll tell you. It's the first Knights of the Old Republic game. He was the lead writer of there. And he's written a few other BioWare games, but I haven't looked into what those are. And it was also the lead... He was either... I think he was the lead writer, or at least one of the main writers for SWTOR later on. And also the Revan SWTOR tie-in book. So yes, Revan Malak and the events of the first KOTOR game are referenced like 5 to 7 times throughout this book. Bane finds a holocron left by Revan. And then, bada bing, bada boom. Because the thing with the Brotherhood of Darkness is that they've, well, lost the way of the Sith. Pretty much the prequel era Jedi. They lost their way. They don't really follow their old teachings anymore. And like in Jedi vs. Sith, Bane sees that the dark side is spread too thin and it needs to be contained. And of course, seeing him come to that conclusion is really interesting, and seeing how big of a role Revan played is honestly, like, really fucking cool. You know, because, one, we get the reference to another piece of Star Wars, but we also see that even 3,000 years later, Revan's story is still impacting the galaxy. And one point I did find pretty humorous, especially in hindsight, is it's one of his, I think it was the first reference to Revan. One of the characters, I think it was a Republic soldier, maybe it was Bane, said that Revan's story was complicated in response to him being both a Jedi Sith and then back to being a Jedi. And of course, you know, with SWTOR in mind and the Revan novel, that is definitely the fucking case. I'll get more into that when I actually read the Revan novel. I'm still playing SWTOR, and I'm not going to get to the Shadow of Revan expansion for quite a while. Anyways, so that is nice, and, you know, it's an author referencing his own work. I mean, I don't know. On the one hand, I do like Revan, Malak, and then also the events of KOTOR getting referenced quite a bit. I don't know. I just feel like... I don't want to say this is the case, but it feels to me like Drew Karpyshyn is just stroking his own ego. That is probably totally unfair. It probably is unfair on my part. That's just the feeling I got. I don't think that's what was happening here. But, given how much this book retcons Jedi vs. Sith, let's get into that. So I mentioned in the Jedi vs. Sith video that, from what I heard from my colleagues over at State of Star Wars is that this book retconned the Jedi vs. Sith comic to hell. And of course, I was going to hold off judgment until I actually read it, and yes, it does. Mostly in regards to rearranging events. Like, the Jedi vs. Sith comic opens up with Bane already being poisoned. Well, it opens with Bane being poisoned and, killing that father and his 3 sons. That doesn't happen in this book until, start of the 3rd act, or during the 3rd act. Long after we've seen several events on Ruusan. Events that we did see in the comic, but happened far later in the comic. And then we have other stuff like Bug and Tomcat are never seen in this book. They are name dropped by Rain, aka Zana, during the epilogue, and even Zana doesn't show up until the epilogue. They aren't referenced, and Tomcat, Darvin, never joins up with Githany. And Githany never kills her ex-lover, despite that happening in the comic. And he's even name-dropped earlier on in the novel by her. And even the bouncers, the bouncers do show up, but they don't play as big of a role. What they're doing is referenced of, trying to soothe people while, they're injured or dying, and then eventually it starts turning into the bouncers giving them nightmares because of all the shit that's going on during the battle, and the Jedi subsequently killing them off so they don't cause the troops trouble. That doesn't, it's there, but it's not as important as it was in the comic. And Bane doesn't meet Zana until after the thought bomb goes off. While in the comic, he meets her before it goes off. And they have and she has one last interaction with her cousin Darvin before her and Bane, bug her off. But here, and of course she also blows up the lightsaber in Darvin's hand, and, now he's missing a hand. But that doesn't happen here. From what I've heard, Darvin does show up later on in the trilogy, I think in the 2nd book. So we'll see if that event still happens. But I just find it does piss me off. The various continuity problems between this and Jedi vs. Sith. Whichever one is the better version of events is irrelevant. The fact that, and even small stuff like dialogue changes, some dialogue is lifted straight from the comic, then others are slightly altered. Shit like that really bothers me. As I tell people that, the continuity of the EU is really fucking tight, but then shit like this happens, and then no. One could make the argument that when it comes to hard set canonicity, you can have a little leeway when it comes to dialogue and specific events, as long as the general idea and general events are the same. But I'm not a fan of what this book does to Jedi vs. Sith. One of the things that I think Jedi vs. Sith definitely did better was Bane was portrayed as somebody who, had been a part of the Brotherhood of Darkness for a while, actually interacting with the other members, Khan, Kopesh, and it also felt like Githany had been a part of the Brotherhood for a while. While in the book, she's still at the. She only joins the Brotherhood of Darkness after the entire Academy on Korriban is sent to Ruusan to help in the war effort. So we don't have all this like history between these characters. I mean, there is. Githany and Bane do have a history at the Academy. And Kopesh is the reason how or why Bane went to the Academy in the first place. But Bane never... Bane first sees Khan for the first time when he first goes to Ruusan. And I mean, that doesn't really contradict what we got in the comic. I mean, we got no hard indication that, Bane and Khan had, known each other for a while. But, I don't know, that's just the feeling I got. But in other cases, it does add better context. In Jedi vs. Sith, we see after Bane pretty much gives Khan the finger after returning, Githany and Bane get into a conversation, and Bane reveals to her that he knows the bowl she gave him of soup was poisoned. And we find out that she was the one who poisoned him and kissed him. And that's how he was poisoned. And that's also what we get in the novel. But there we get the context of they had a thing going on, though neither one would really act on it, and plus because Githany's kind of a bitch, nothing really comes of it. Then in other news, we see that the healer he goes to, I think his name's Caleb, one has a name. And we also see that Bane doesn't kill him and his daughter, which did make me happy, because it meant that in the story, the barefoot girl survive and all the barefoot boys die. So that was nice. Unfortunately, it's never said if Zana was barefoot, but because nothing contradicts it, I'm just gonna say she was. And have that keep on going throughout the rest of the trilogy until I get word that says otherwise. So, overall, Path of Destruction is a really good book. Darth Bane is an interesting character, getting to see just what led him to become a Sith, and also the one who created the rule of two. And getting understanding as to why somebody would join the Sith over the Jedi, or Sith Empire over the Republic. Because yeah, the Star Wars galaxy is, well, kind of a shithole that people say they would like to live in the Star Wars universe, but no, the Star Wars universe would be a terrible place to live in. Wars happening like all the fucking time. Shit like this happening. Oh well. And this does retcon the ever-loving crap out of Jedi vs. Sith. In terms of that, the biggest loss, in my opinion, is I prefer what we got with Jedi vs. Sith, the idea that Bane was already an established guy within the Brotherhood of Darkness and not just, a guy from the Academy on Korriban. I mean, either way, we get the same result. Bane becoming the lone survivor of a brother of the Sith from the thought bomb. But still, at the end of the day, if that comic had to be retconned, this was honestly the best thing we could have gotten from that. So yeah, you can read this and skip the comic. The only reason to read the comic, in my opinion, is just to see how weird the aesthetic can get. And to see Tomcat, or Devrin, Hardin, and Zana's story, which is briefly talked about in the epilogue. I mean, it's still retconned. Hell, I have no idea how much of the comic is still canon within the context of the EU. But that's something I'll have to figure out later. Maybe bits and pieces, I don't know. Point is, just read both. Determine for yourselves which one you think is better. Alright guys, that's all I got for you today. What did you think of Darth Bane? Did you enjoy it retconning the shit out of Jedi vs. Sith? Did that make you happy? Did you really love all the references to KOTOR and Revan? Let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, this is Captain Henson, signing off.